I'm standing in my kitchen, in this converted attic apartment in Cleveland, watching my breath fog up the one window we have, and I'm heating up leftovers again for dinner. Just me. Again. And you know what? I'm about to tell you something I never thought I'd say out loud, because honestly, I'm still ashamed of how long it took me to see what was happening right in front of my face. My own children turned me into their personal ATM while I lived in poverty, and the worst part is I let them because I thought that's what mothers were supposed to do. If you've ever felt used by the people you love most, if you've ever questioned whether you're the problem, please stay with me, because what I'm about to share isn't just my story. It could be yours too. And if it helps even one person break free from the trap I was in for 15 years, then maybe sharing this humiliation will mean something. So if this resonates with you at all, hit that like button and subscribe, because these stories need to reach the people who are living them right now, sitting alone in their own attic apartments wondering why they're not enough. It's a Tuesday night in February, the kind of cold that seeps through the walls no matter how high you turn up the heat. I'm wearing this lavender nightgown I've had for 20 years, the fabric so thin now you can almost see through it, and I'm microwaving meatloaf from 3 days ago. There's a ceramic cookie jar shaped like a house sitting on my kitchen counter. The one thing in this place that still looks cheerful, and every time I look at it, I think about the house I used to have. The real house. Before I gave it all away. My phone buzzes. It's Michelle, my middle child. She sent a group text to me and her brothers. There's a photo attached. It's her daughter's birthday party. I wasn't invited. In the background of the picture, I can see my son Robert's brand new Cadillac Escalade in midnight black parked in her driveway. That car cost more than I've spent on myself in the last decade. I set the phone down and look around this space they helped me move into after I lost my house. Sloped ceilings that make me duck when I walk from the bedroom to the bathroom. One window that fogs up every winter from the contrast between the cold outside and the warmth I'm desperately trying to keep in here. A kitchenette that barely fits a table for one. This is what 71 looks like when you've spent your whole life putting everyone else first. Under the glass dome on my counter sits a pound cake I baked 5 days ago. I've had 2 slices. The rest is drying out because you can't eat a whole cake when you're alone and nobody visits. But I keep baking them anyway. These cakes that nobody comes to eat, because somewhere deep down, I still believe that if I just do enough, make enough, give enough, they'll remember I exist. The apartment smells like old steam heat and lemon pledge. I keep everything spotless because that's what I learned growing up in this neighborhood. We didn't have much, but what we had was clean. My parents taught me that family comes first, no matter what. That you sacrifice for the people you love because that's what love looks like. I believe that with my whole heart. I still do, in some broken way that I can't quite shake. I open my worn Bible on the nightstand, the one with my reading glasses folded on top, and I flip to the passages I've underlined over the years. Honor thy father and mother. Love one another. Forgive 70 times 7. But nowhere does it say, let your children bleed you dry while you live in an attic and eat leftovers alone. That's when the memory hits me, sharp and clear, like it happened yesterday instead of 40 years ago. I'm in my old kitchen, the real one, with sunlight coming through actual windows that weren't jammed up against the ceiling. I'm humming while I iron clothes the old-fashioned way, pressing my son's shirts and my daughter's blouses, making sure they looked perfect for school. Robert couldn't have been more than 8. He came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist and said, "When I grow up, I'm gonna buy you a mansion, Mama. The biggest one in Cleveland." I remember laughing. I remember thinking that's all I needed to hear. That promise of future love was enough to sustain me through anything. I didn't know then that the mansion would be his and the attic would be mine. When my 3 kids were born, when they were struggling with their careers and their marriages and their mortgages, I didn't hesitate. I gave them everything: time, money, my reputation, my peace of mind. Robert was the oldest, always ambitious, always chasing the next big opportunity. Michelle was my emotional one, the one who could cry on command and make me feel like the worst mother in the world if I ever said no. David was my baby, my tender-hearted one, Or so I thought back then. They each had their struggles, their emergencies, their crises that only I could solve. And I solved them. Every single one. I was humming while I ironed clothes the old-fashioned way, pressing their professional clothes even after they'd moved out, making sure they looked sharp for the jobs they told me they desperately needed to keep. Years of that. Decades. Humming like it brought me joy, when really, I was just trying to be invisible and useful at the same time. That's the trick, you know? If you're useful enough, maybe they won't notice you're breaking. If you're always available, always ready, always saying yes, maybe they won't leave you behind. That was my strategy for staying loved. Be indispensable. Be the solution to every problem. Never ask for anything in return. I gave up so much. Things I didn't even realize I was giving up until they were already gone. I used to garden. I had a little plot behind that old house where I grew tomatoes and peppers and herbs. My neighbors would come by, and I'd send them home with bags full of vegetables. That was my meditation, my therapy, my connection to something bigger than just being a mother and a grandmother. But when the kids needed help, I couldn't afford the time. The garden went to weeds. Then it went to concrete when David said he needed a place to park his truck. I used to go to church every Sunday, not just for the service but for the fellowship afterward. There was a group of women my age who would meet for coffee and talk about life, real life, the stuff you can't say in front of your families. But then Robert's wife got sick, or maybe she was pregnant, or maybe it was something else. He needed me to watch the kids every Sunday. So I stopped going to church. I stopped having those conversations with women who might have told me the truth about what was happening to me. I gave up travel. I gave up hobbies. I gave up friendships. I gave up the small pleasures that make life bearable when you're getting older and your body hurts and you're tired all the time. I gave it all up because I thought that's what good mothers do. You sacrifice. You give until there's nothing left, and then you give some more. The first time Robert asked me for money, he showed up at my door on a Wednesday evening looking stressed and defeated. This was maybe 15 years ago, when I still had my house and my savings and my foolish belief that family would never hurt you on purpose. He sat at my kitchen table and he cried. Actually cried. Told me he'd made some bad investments, that his credit was ruined, that he was going to lose everything if I didn't help him. $20,000. That's what needed. Just a loan, he promised. He'd pay me back within 6 months. I had that money saved up, tucked away in a retirement account I'd been building since I was 40. It was supposed to be my safety net, my insurance against ending up dependent on anyone. But here was my son crying at my table, and what was I supposed to do? Say no? Watch him lose his home? I gave him the money. I took it out of my retirement account, and I handed it over, and he hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. He said I was saving his life. He said he'd never forget this. He said I was the best mother in the world. 6 months came and went. No payment. A year, 2 years. Whenever I gently brought it up, he'd get defensive. He'd remind me of all his expenses, his kids' private school tuition, his mortgage, his wife's medical bills. He'd make me feel guilty for even asking. So I stopped asking. Then Michelle came to me. Her small business was failing and she needed $15,000 to stay afloat. She brought spreadsheets. She brought a business plan. She made it sound so professional, so legitimate, so certain that this investment would pay off. I didn't have $15,000 sitting around anymore, but I had equity in my house. I took out a loan against it. I gave her the money. She never paid me back either. The business folded within a year. But by then, she was on to the next thing, the next opportunity, the next emergency that required my attention and my money and my unquestioning support. David was the last one, and somehow his betrayal hurt the most because I really believed he was different. He came to me wanting to invest in what he called a sure thing, a business opportunity that would set him up for life. He just needed me to co-sign a loan because his credit wasn't good enough. $25,000. I had almost nothing left in savings by then. But I co-signed because he was my baby, and I couldn't stand the idea of him struggling. The investment never existed. I found that out later, much later, when I was finally brave enough to ask questions. He'd used that money for a down payment on a truck and a vacation to Mexico with his girlfriend. The loan went into default. They came after me for the payments. I had to sell my house to cover the debt. That's how I ended up here, in this attic apartment that my children helped me move into while assuring me it was temporary, just until I got back on my feet. That was 6 years ago. I'm still here. They're all in houses I helped them buy with money I gave them that they never paid back. But here's the thing that haunts me. The thing that keeps me up at night staring at that ceramic cookie jar and wondering where I went wrong. I blamed myself. That's the sickness of it, you understand? I kept thinking, well, maybe I should have been smarter about it. Maybe I should have asked for paperwork. Maybe I should have demanded contracts and payment plans. Maybe I should have said no. Every time I saw them pulling up in nice cars, living in nice houses, taking vacations, I told myself it was fine because they were happy. Wasn't that what I'd worked for my whole life? Their happiness? Never mind that I was eating dollar store pasta and turning down the heat to save money. Never mind that I couldn't afford new clothes or a haircut or even a phone plan with enough data to look at the pictures they posted on social media. I was supposed to be grateful just to have given them a good start in life. And you know what kept me quiet all those years? This belief that I deserved it, that I must have done something wrong as a mother if they felt comfortable lying to my face and stealing my retirement and leaving me in this attic apartment with one window and sloped ceilings that give me headaches. I was 70 years old and still convinced that somehow I was the one who'd failed. I'd see other elderly people, friends from church back when I used to go, and they'd talk about their children taking them on trips or helping with bills or just visiting regularly. And I'd smile and nod and lie about how close we all were, how often they came by, how generous they were. Because admitting the truth felt like admitting I'd been a terrible mother who'd raised terrible children. And I couldn't face that. I couldn't face the possibility that I'd wasted my entire life loving people who didn't love me back. The sacrifice was bigger than money, though. It was time. Years and years of time I spent managing their problems, picking up the phone every time they called, canceling my own plans. I had a routine, you know. Iron their clothes while humming old hymns. That was my meditation, my way of feeling useful and necessary. But even that wasn't mine anymore, because I was doing it for them, keeping myself available and essential so they couldn't abandon me completely. Every Sunday I'd do their laundry. Every Sunday for 15 years. They'd drop off bags of clothes on Friday and pick them up on Monday, and I'd spend my weekends washing and ironing and folding and organizing. I'd separate the delicates and treat the stains and make sure everything was perfect. That was my value. That was what made me matter. And they never said thank you, not once. It was just expected, like I was a free laundry service they were entitled to use because I'd given birth to them decades ago. The breaking point started small. It was last December, right before Christmas. I'd been saving up all year to buy presents for my grandchildren. Nothing extravagant, just something to let them know their grandmother was thinking of them. I found this beautiful set of books for Robert's daughter, a science kit for Michelle's son, a tablet for David's oldest. I wrapped them carefully and wrote cards expressing how proud I was of them, how much I loved them, how I hoped they were doing well in school. I arranged for Robert to pick up the gifts since he was the closest, and I don't drive anymore. He said he'd come by on December 20th. He never showed up. I called. No answer. I texted. Nothing. Christmas came and went, and those presents sat under my tiny fake tree in their bright wrapping paper, and nobody came to get them. On January 2nd, I got a group text. They'd all gone to Michelle's house for Christmas. There were photos, a huge tree, a pile of presents, everyone smiling. I wasn't invited. My gifts weren't mentioned. That's when something cracked inside me. I looked at those wrapped presents, and I realized they didn't even care enough to pick them up. I wasn't worth a 10-minute drive. I wasn't worth a phone call. I was only worth something when they needed something from me. I unwrapped those presents. I returned what I could and donated the rest. And I made a decision. I was done. Done ironing their clothes, done answering every phone call, Done making myself small and grateful and endlessly available. I was 71 years old, and I deserved better than this. But the real discovery, the one that changed everything, didn't come until February. I was going through old papers, trying to organize my files, when I found bank statements I'd forgotten about. Statements from 2008, 2010, 2012. I started looking at the dates of withdrawals and transfers. I pulled out a notebook, and I started writing things down. March 2009, $20, $1 to Robert. He said it was for medical bills from his wife's surgery. July 2011, $15 to Michelle. She said her business partner had stolen from her and she needed emergency capital. January 2013, $25 co-signed loan for David. He said it was for a down payment on a house. I went online. I looked up property records. Robert had bought a rental property in March 2009. The exact amount of the down payment matched what I'd given him. There were no medical bills. His wife never had surgery that year. Michelle had posted photos on social media from a trip to Europe in August 2011. The business partner story was real, but the money I gave her didn't go to the business. It went to Paris and Rome and Barcelona. David never bought a house in 2013. He bought a truck, an expensive truck he used for weekend trips with his girlfriend at the time, the one he eventually married. I sat there on my narrow bed with these papers spread around me and my worn Bible next to me and my reading glasses fogged up from crying, and I understood. They'd been lying to me for over a decade, systematically, deliberately. They'd been using my love and my guilt and my fear of losing them to fund their lifestyles while I lived in poverty. Every single time they hit a crisis, they came to me. Every single time, and every single time I said yes. Because I was their mother, and that's what mothers do. Except they weren't having crises. They were having wants. They wanted rental properties and European vacations and new trucks, and I was the fool who kept saying yes. The ceramic cookie jar on my counter, the one shaped like a house, suddenly felt like a cruel joke. I'd lost my house giving them money for houses they already had. I was living in an attic while they drove Escalades and took vacations and sent their kids to private schools. I stopped eating. For 3 days I barely touched food. I'd heat up leftovers and then just stare at them until they got cold. That pound cake under the glass dome got moldier, and I didn't care. I couldn't care about anything except this crushing weight of betrayal and stupidity and wasted decades. My collapse point came on a Thursday morning in early March. The snow was piled high outside my one window, and I was freezing despite the heat being on full blast. There was a basket of clothes they'd dropped off on Monday. Robert's work shirts, Michelle's blouses, David's jeans. Sitting there waiting for me to wash and iron them like I'd done every week for 15 years. I looked at that basket, and something inside me just broke, or maybe it finally healed. I picked up the basket, and I shoved it in the hallway outside my apartment door. I didn't wash a single piece. I didn't iron anything. I just put it outside and closed the door and locked it. Then I unplugged my iron. I wrapped the cord around it, and I put it in the back of my closet where I couldn't see it. And I sat down on my bed, and I stopped humming. For the first time in decades, there was no humming, no ironing, no pretending that service and sacrifice were the same thing as love. That night, I had the worst panic attack of my life. I couldn't breathe. I thought I was having a heart attack. I was convinced I'd made a terrible mistake, that they'd never speak to me again, that I'd destroyed the last connection I had to family. I almost called Robert to apologize. I almost begged him to forgive me for being so ungrateful and difficult. But I didn't. I sat there in the dark with my hand on my phone, and I didn't call. I just let the panic wash over me until it finally passed, and I could breathe again. The next morning, Michelle called. Not to ask if I was okay, not to check on me, to ask where her clothes were. I told her they were in the hallway. She asked when they'd be ready. I said never. I wasn't doing laundry anymore. There was silence on the other end. Then she laughed. Actually laughed. She said, "What are you talking about? You always do our laundry." I said, Not anymore. She hung up without saying goodbye. That was 6 months ago. In those 6 months, not one of them called to ask why I'd stopped. Not one of them came by to check if I was alive. They just found other people to do their laundry. Michelle started using a wash and fold service. Robert hired a housekeeper. David's wife took over. Life went on for them without missing a beat. But something had shifted in me. I'd stopped doing the thing that made me useful, and the sky didn't fall. They didn't disown me. They just moved on, which told me everything I needed to know about what I actually meant to them. I started becoming my own detective. I printed out every bank statement I could find going back 20 years. I made spreadsheets. I tracked every dollar I'd given them and every promise they'd made to pay me back. The total was staggering. Over $100,000 over 15 years. Money I'd given them willingly, stupidly, desperately, because I thought that's what kept them connected to me. I went to the library and used their computers to look up property records, business filings, social media posts. I built a timeline of their lives. Every time they'd told me they were struggling, I found evidence of luxury purchases or vacations or investments. They weren't struggling, they were thriving. On my money. One afternoon in late March, I was sitting in that library with all my papers spread out on a table, and a young woman approached me. She was a lawyer, she said, and she'd overheard me talking to the librarian about my situation. She asked if I'd ever considered taking legal action. Legal action. The word sounded absurd. You don't sue your children. You don't take your own kids to court. That's not what families do. But then she said something that stuck with me. She said, "What they did to you is elder financial abuse. It's a crime, and it doesn't stop being a crime just because the perpetrators are your children." I took her card. Lisa Chen was her name. She specialized in elder law, and she said she'd seen cases like mine before. Too many cases. She said she'd work with me on payment, that this kind of case made her angry enough to take it on for almost nothing just to see justice done. I went home and I looked at my ceramic cookie jar, and I thought about everything I'd lost. Not just the money, the house, the garden, the friendships, the church community, the version of myself who used to hum while doing simple tasks because life felt manageable. I'd lost all of that trying to buy love from people who were never going to love me back. I called Lisa Chen the next day. We pulled together everything. Bank statements, emails, text messages where they'd promised to pay me back. Property records showing what they'd actually bought with my money. Social media posts proving they'd lied about their financial situations. It took weeks to organize it all, but when we were done, we had a case. A solid case. In May, Lisa sent certified letters to each of my children. Formal legal letters with all the documentation attached. We weren't asking for forgiveness. We weren't asking for apologies. We were demanding repayment of the money they'd stolen, plus interest, plus legal fees. I wasn't prepared for what happened next. Robert was the first to respond. He called me screaming. Actually screaming. Told me I was insane, that I was destroying the family, that he'd given me so much over the years, and this was how I repaid him. He said taking care of me in my old age was payment enough, that letting me live in that apartment was more than he owed me. Letting me live. In an attic. That was his gift to me. For $100,000. Michelle came by in person. She brought her daughter, my granddaughter, who's 7. She stood in my doorway with this child between us, and she cried. She said I was breaking her heart, that she couldn't believe I'd prioritize money over family, that she'd thought I was better than this. Her daughter looked confused and sad, and I realized Michelle was using her own child as a shield, as leverage, as a weapon to make me feel guilty. I looked at my granddaughter and I said, "Baby, your mama took money from me and lied about it. She's trying to make me feel bad for asking for it back. Don't ever let anyone do that to you, okay? Even family." Michelle grabbed her daughter's hand and left. She sent me a text later that night saying I'd never see her kids again. David was the one who surprised me. He showed up drunk at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night, pounding on my door. When I opened it, He collapsed in my doorway crying. Said he was sorry, that he'd known it was wrong but he didn't know how to stop, that everyone was doing it so it felt normal. He said he'd pay me back, but he didn't have the money right now. Could I give him more time? More time. After 15 years. I told him the lawyers would be in touch and I closed the door. His wife called me the next day. She was crying too. She said she'd had no idea. That David had told her I'd given them the money as gifts. She said she wanted to help make it right, that she'd start working extra shifts to pay me back something. Anything. She was the first person in this whole nightmare who seemed to understand that what they'd done was wrong. The legal process moved slowly. Lisa filed complaints with the state. She contacted the bank about some of the fraudulent transfers. She submitted our documentation to everyone who would look at it. And then we waited. In July, Robert got audited. Turns out, when you buy investment properties with undocumented loans from your elderly mother, the IRS gets interested. They started asking questions about his income, his property holdings, his sources of capital. He tried to claim the money from me was a gift, but we had his text messages promising to pay me back. Gifts don't get repaid. Loans do. The audit triggered a review of his taxes going back 7 years. He ended up owing over $40,000 in back taxes and penalties. His credit took a hit. He had to sell one of his rental properties to cover the debt. Michelle's situation unraveled differently. Her business partner, the one who'd actually been a victim of her lies years ago, found out about my case through mutual acquaintances. She contacted Lisa and provided evidence that Michelle had used investor money inappropriately in the past. Word got around in their professional community. Michelle started losing clients. Her business, the new one she'd built after the first one failed, started struggling. She had to lay off employees. She had to downsize her office. David lost his job. His drinking got worse after our confrontation, and he showed up to work drunk one too many times. His wife did start working extra shifts. She sent me $200 one month with a note saying it was all she could spare, but she'd send more when she could. It made me cry. Not because of the money, but because someone finally acknowledged that what happened to me mattered. The interesting thing about legal action is that it sends ripples. Once I'd filed official complaints, once there was documentation and lawyers involved, other people started paying attention. Robert's wife found out he'd been lying to her about where their down payment money came from. She'd thought it was from his inheritance when his father died, but I was able to show her bank records proving that wasn't true. She filed for separation. Michelle's husband confronted her about the money. They'd been having their own financial problems, and suddenly he understood why. She'd been covering her business losses with his income while telling him everything was fine. They went to marriage counseling, but I don't know if they'll make it. But here's what changed for me during all of this. I started taking care of myself. For the first time in decades, I put myself first. In June, I walked past a flower shop and I saw roses in the window, pink ones, beautiful and fresh and completely unnecessary. I walked in and I bought myself a dozen. The woman behind the counter asked if it was a special occasion, and I said yes. I was celebrating being alive. I brought those flowers home to my attic apartment, and I put them in a vase on the counter next to the ceramic cookie jar. Every morning for a week, I woke up and saw something beautiful first thing. Something I'd bought for myself with no ulterior motive. No attempt to make someone else happy or keep someone close. Just flowers because I wanted them. That small act of self-care cracked something open. I started doing more. I bought myself new nightgowns, actual new ones, because the lavender one I'd been wearing for 20 years was literally falling apart. I went to a salon and got my hair cut properly for the first time in 5 years. I started walking in the mornings, just around the neighborhood, breathing in the summer air and feeling my body move without purpose or obligation. My energy came back. I'd been so tired for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to wake up not exhausted. I'd thought it was just age, just the natural decline of getting older. But it wasn't. It was depression. It was the weight of being used and discarded and blamed for my own mistreatment. Once I started fighting back, once I stopped accepting their lies, my body remembered how to feel alive. I started making plans to move, not right away, but eventually. I'd been dreaming about a mobile home in a warm climate where I didn't have to shovel snow or deal with winters that froze me in this attic. Florida, maybe, or Arizona. Somewhere with sun and warmth and a small community of people my age who weren't dependent on children who'd betrayed them. I printed out pictures of mobile home parks and I taped them to my wall above my bed. Every night before I slept, I looked at those pictures and I imagined myself there, sitting on a little porch in the sunshine, drinking coffee in the morning without shivering, growing a small garden again, tomatoes and peppers and herbs, getting my hands dirty and watching things grow. That's when I realized the Cadillac Escalade had never been my dream. It was theirs. I'd spent years seeing Robert pull up in that expensive car and feeling proud that my son had succeeded, never acknowledging that his success was built partially on my poverty. I didn't want an Escalade. I wanted a warm place to live, and flowers on my counter, and the freedom to spend my remaining years however I chose. September brought the confrontation I'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. Michelle sent a group email to all of us saying we needed to have a family meeting. She'd booked a private room at a restaurant downtown. She said it was time we worked this out like adults. I didn't want to go. Every instinct told me it was a trap, another attempt to manipulate me into backing down. But Lisa said I should go, that I should record the conversation on my phone, that sometimes these meetings revealed truths people hadn't intended to share. I arrived at the restaurant early. The private room was cold and formal, a long table with too many chairs. Robert was already there, sitting at the head of the table like he was chairing a business meeting. Michelle came in with her husband. David showed up late, looking hungover and defeated. They'd coordinated without me. That became clear immediately. They had a presentation, actual slides on a laptop. Their argument was that they'd helped me far more than I'd helped them over the years. They had a list of every time they'd given me a ride somewhere, every time they'd helped me move, every time they'd bought me groceries or paid a utility bill. They'd quantified their love and decided it was worth more than the $100,000 they'd stolen. Robert did most of the talking. He said I was being selfish and vindictive. He said dragging the family through legal proceedings was elder abuse in itself, that I was causing stress and trauma for everyone. He said the Christian thing to do would be to forgive the debt and move forward as a family. The Christian thing. From the man who'd lied to my face for over a decade. Michelle cried. She was good at that. She said she couldn't believe I valued money over my grandchildren, that she'd thought I was a better person than this. She said if I continued with the lawsuit, she'd have no choice but to cut me off completely. I'd never see her kids again. Was that what I wanted? To die alone because of money? David didn't say much. He just sat there looking miserable while his wife squeezed his hand. When they were done with their presentation, they looked at me expectantly, waiting for me to crumble, to apologize, to take it all back and return to being the grateful mother who accepted whatever crumbs they threw her way. I pulled out my phone. I'd been recording the whole thing like Lisa suggested. I placed it on the table where they could see it. Then I pulled out a folder. Inside were copies of all the documentation Lisa and I had assembled. Bank transfers, property records, social media posts, text messages where they'd promised to pay me back. The timeline of their lies. I slid a copy across the table to each of them. Here's what's going to happen, I said. My voice was steady. I'd practiced this. You're going to read these documents. You're going to see, in writing, with dates and amounts and proof, exactly what you did to me. And then you're going to make a choice. Robert started to interrupt, but I held up my hand. You can acknowledge what you did, work with my lawyer to set up a reasonable repayment plan, and maybe, eventually, we can rebuild some kind of relationship. Or you can keep lying and manipulating and threatening me with the loss of your children, and I will see you in court. Those are your options. Michelle said, You can't be serious. We're your kids. Family doesn't sue family. Family doesn't steal from family either, I said. But here we are. I stood up, I picked up my phone and my purse. And I walked out of that restaurant, leaving them with their presentations and their tears and their documented crimes. Lisa said it was the bravest thing she'd seen a client do. I didn't feel brave. I felt terrified and sad and so tired. But I also felt something else, something I hadn't felt in years. I felt free. October brought what I can only describe as the universe's sense of justice. Robert's wife served him with divorce papers. She'd found evidence of other lies, other manipulations, and she was done. The divorce proceedings revealed that Robert had been hiding assets from her, using offshore accounts and shell companies to avoid splitting property fairly. The court didn't look kindly on that. He lost half his rental income in the settlement. Michelle's business partner, the one from years ago, filed a civil suit against her for fraud. Apparently the money Michelle had claimed was stolen had actually been diverted by Michelle herself. The case was solid. Michelle's lawyer advised her to settle. She ended up paying back a significant amount, which meant she had even less money to fight my case. David's wife left him, not because of the money, but because his drinking had spiraled completely out of control. She took their kids and moved in with her parents. David ended up in rehab. To his credit, he actually stayed. He completed the program and sent me a letter from the facility. The letter was 6 pages long. He apologized for everything. He explained how he'd watched Robert and Michelle take from me and figured it was normal, that everyone was doing it, so it must be okay. He said he'd used alcohol to numb the guilt and shame. He said he understood if I never forgave him, but he wanted me to know he was getting help. He included a repayment plan, $500 a month starting when he got out of rehab. It would take him years to repay what he owed, but he was committed to doing it. I cried when I read that letter. Not because $500 a month would make a real difference in my financial situation, but because someone had finally, truly acknowledged what they'd done to me without excuses or deflection. November brought an unexpected twist. Michelle's daughter, my granddaughter, sent me a card. She was only 7, but she'd drawn a picture of the two of us holding hands. Inside, in her careful child handwriting, it said, "I miss you, Grandma. Mommy says you're mean, but I don't think you're mean. Can I visit you?" Her mother had clearly not approved this card. The return address was for Michelle's husband's office. He must have helped her send it. It broke my heart and healed something in me at the same time. I called Michelle's husband. I said if his daughter wanted to visit me, I'd welcome her, but I wouldn't go against Michelle's wishes. He said Michelle was starting to crack, that the weight of everything was getting to her. He thought she might be ready to talk soon. Really talk, not just manipulate. December came and I decided to do something unprecedented. I spent money on myself. Real money. I booked a week-long trip to Key West. I'd never been to Florida before. I wanted to see if it was really where I wanted to retire, if the dream matched reality. I flew on a plane for the first time in 20 years. I stayed in a small hotel near the beach. I walked on the sand every morning and every evening. I ate at restaurants where I ordered exactly what I wanted without checking the prices. I bought souvenirs. I got a tan. I felt the sun on my face and the ocean breeze in my hair, and I understood what I'd been missing. While I was there, I visited mobile home parks. I talked to residents. I learned about costs and communities and what life was actually like in these places. Most of them were filled with people like me, older folks who'd been burned by family or circumstance and were rebuilding their lives with whatever resources they had left. We understood each other. We didn't judge. I found a park I loved. It had a community garden and a small pool and regular social events. The units were modest but well-maintained. The lot fees were reasonable. I could afford this. I could actually afford to leave Cleveland and start over. I came back from that trip transformed. My skin was browner. My hair was longer and lighter from the sun. My eyes were clearer. People in my neighborhood barely recognized me. The woman who'd been shrinking into her attic apartment for 6 years had expanded again. The ceramic cookie jar on my counter, the one shaped like a house, suddenly didn't look sad anymore. It looked like a reminder. I'd lost one house, but I was going to get another one. A smaller one, a simpler one, but mine, all mine. No one to owe, no one to answer to. In January, almost a full year after I'd stopped ironing their clothes, Michelle called. She asked if she could come by. Alone, just to talk. I said yes. She came on a Thursday afternoon. She looked terrible. She'd lost weight. Her hair was graying. She had dark circles under her eyes. She sat at my small kitchen table, and she cried. Real crying, not the manipulative kind I'd seen so many times before. She said she'd been in therapy, that her therapist had asked her to really look at what she'd done to me, not just defensively, but honestly. She said she'd realized that somewhere along the way, she'd stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as a resource. That the shame of that realization was overwhelming. She said she couldn't pay me back right now, not all of it, but she wanted to try. She was selling her house and downsizing. She'd have some equity, and she wanted to give me half of it. It wouldn't be everything, but it would be something. I asked her why now. Why, after a year of fighting and lying and threatening to keep my grandchildren from me, was she finally telling the truth? She said, because my daughter asked me why you were mean, and I tried to explain it in a way that made me look good, and I couldn't. Every version of the story made me the villain, and I realized that's because I am the villain. I'm the one who hurt you, not the other way around. We talked for 3 hours. She told me things I'd never known. How she'd felt competing with her brothers for my attention growing up. How she'd watched me sacrifice everything for them and resented it even as she demanded the same treatment. How taking my money had felt like claiming what was owed to her, some kind of twisted emotional debt collection. She said she was teaching her daughter something terrible by treating me this way. That if her daughter grew up watching her grandmother be discarded and mistreated, she'd learn that's how you treat people who love you. She didn't want that. She wanted to break the cycle. Before she left, she hugged me. She whispered in my ear, "I'm so sorry, Mom, for all of it." It wasn't enough. Not yet. Sorry doesn't erase years of betrayal and theft and manipulation. But it was a start. February brought the settlement. David had been sending his monthly payments from rehab. Michelle followed through on her promise and gave me half her home equity, about $35,000. Robert fought to the end, but eventually his lawyer advised him to settle rather than face a public trial. He agreed to a structured payment plan. I won't get all my money back, probably not even half, but I'll get enough. Enough to put a down payment on that mobile home in Florida. Enough to have a small nest egg for emergencies. Enough to know that my sacrifice wasn't completely for nothing. The ceramic cookie jar sits on my counter still. I'm taking it with me when I move. It's not a sad symbol anymore. It's a reminder of where I've been and where I'm going. Now it's March, almost exactly a year since I stopped ironing their clothes. I'm sitting here in my attic apartment, but not for much longer. I close on the mobile home in April. I've been packing slowly, getting rid of things I don't need, keeping only what matters. My health has improved dramatically. My doctor said my blood pressure is the lowest it's been in a decade. I'm sleeping through the night. I'm eating properly again. Turns out stress and betrayal are worse for you than aging. I've started humming again. But now, when I hum, it's because I'm happy, not because I'm trying to disappear. I hum while I pack boxes. I hum while I walk through my neighborhood, saying goodbye to places I've known for years. I hum while I look at pictures of my new home, my new garden plot, my new life. David's wife brought the kids to visit me last week. She'd gotten back together with him now that he's sober, but she made it clear she's watching him carefully. The kids made me cards. We baked cookies together, using my ceramic cookie jar to store them. They asked if they could visit me in Florida. I said yes. Michelle brings her daughter by every other week now. We're rebuilding slowly. There's still hurt and anger and wariness on both sides. But her daughter loves me, and that matters. I'm teaching her to garden in pots on my tiny balcony until I can show her the real thing in Florida. Robert hasn't spoken to me since the settlement. His ex-wife has, though. She thanked me for exposing what he was. She said it freed her. Sometimes the truth sets everyone free, even when it's painful. Here's what I want you to understand, because this matters more than anything else I've told you. I'm not the only one. This story isn't unique. It's happening right now in attic apartments and basement rooms and nursing homes across this country. Studies show that in communities like mine, 1 in 3 seniors suffers some form of mistreatment, often from family. 1 in 3. That means if you know 3 elderly people, one of them is being abused, neglected, or financially exploited. And they probably won't tell you because they're ashamed, because they blame themselves, because they believe they deserve it. The FBI recorded over 101,000 fraud complaints from people 60 and older in 2023 alone. Over 100,000. That's more than 277 new cases every single day. Those are just the ones who reported it. How many more are sitting silent, eating their leftovers alone, wondering why they're not good enough to be loved properly by their own children? When I talk to people my age about what happened to me, they nod. They understand. Almost everyone has a story like mine, or knows someone who does. The details change, but the pattern is the same. Sacrifice, exploitation, betrayal, shame, over and over again. We're taught that family is everything, that you endure anything for the people who share your blood. But nobody teaches us what to do when the people who share your blood are the ones bleeding you dry. Nobody prepares you for the moment you realize your children see you as an ATM instead of a person. So here's what I've learned. What I wish someone had told me 40 years ago when I was young and naive and convinced that love and sacrifice were the same thing. They're not. Love doesn't demand everything and give nothing back. Love doesn't lie and steal and manipulate. Love doesn't make you small and afraid and ashamed. Real love respects boundaries. Real love acknowledges sacrifice instead of expecting it. Real love says thank you. Real love doesn't have to be bought. If you're reading this and you recognize yourself, if you've been giving and giving while everyone takes, please hear me. It's not your fault. You're not stupid for trusting your own children. You're not selfish for wanting basic respect and honesty. You're not cruel for asking for what you're owed. And it's not too late. I'm 71 years old, and I'm starting over. I'm moving to Florida to live in a mobile home with a garden plot and a community of people who understand. I'm buying myself flowers. I'm sleeping through the night. I'm humming again. You can do this too. Whether you're 50 or 70 or 90, you can stop accepting mistreatment. You can become your own detective and advocate. You can demand justice. You can walk away from people who hurt you even if they're family. Especially if they're family. The hardest part is accepting that you can't buy love. I spent $100,000 and 15 years trying, and all I bought was resentment and entitlement. The people who truly love you don't need to be paid. They show up because they want to, not because you're useful. My grandchildren love me. Not because I gave them things or did things for them, but because I'm their grandmother and I make them feel safe and seen. That's what love actually looks like. Simple, free, genuine. So I'm asking you, wherever you are, whatever you're going through, are you giving from love, or are you giving from fear of being abandoned? Can you feel the difference? Because I couldn't, not for decades. I thought they were the same thing. They're not. Fear makes you small. Love makes you whole. I'm choosing wholeness now, finally. At 71. Better late than never. If my story resonates with you, if you see yourself in this attic apartment eating leftovers alone while your children thrive on your sacrifice, please know you're not crazy. You're not wrong. And you're not alone. I see you. I was you. And I'm here to tell you that there's another way. You just have to be brave enough to choose yourself. Are you giving from love, or are you giving from fear of being abandoned? Can you feel the difference?